Well, I see a few more people trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get kicked off so that we can start talking about advocacy in action and how to build an effective communication plan. My name is Ali Spalding. I'm our marketing manager here at Prompt.io, and I am here to talk to you a little bit about what we're going to do today. So we'll be talking to Alex Dickinson and Johnny Craig. So let's go through some quick things right here. So of course, our agenda, everyone welcome in. We'll be doing some introductions. We'll be talking about tools, social media, email, texting, all of your best practices that come with an advocacy communications plan. And then of course, Q&A. So first things first, I'm going to launch a little poll for everyone to talk about your comms plans and how comfortable you're feeling with them right now. Please be honest. We love to see if you are happy, somewhat happy, very, very happy, not happy at all. So these are things that, we love to hear from you so that we can really make sure that we're tailoring this to what you all need. If you have questions, please do go ahead and pop them in the Q&A tab down at the bottom. It'll be right down at the bottom below. That way we can filter them through to our speakers and make sure that everyone is getting their questions answered. It looks like we've got a pretty big poll on somewhat happy. So that's good to know. There's always room for improvement. So I am going to actually kick it off. And I'm going to let Johnny take over here from Prompt.io. Johnny, go ahead.
Ali, thanks for the warm introduction. Hello, everyone. Delighted to be here, especially a lot of familiar names joining us today. As Ali said, my name is Johnny Craig. I'm Vice President of Business Development here at Prompt.io. And for those who are not familiar with Prompt.io, we are a robust texting platform for political organizations, advocacy groups, and nonprofits. We cover everything from 10DLC registration to dedicated support, peer-to-peer text messaging, and other texting products. And what's great about sort of the time that we've kind of put together this webinar is we're seeing a lot of folks sort of emerge out of, for lack of a better phrase, like winter hibernation, right? Like I feel like spring is kind of synced up well with this webinar. And so what that basically means is we're seeing sort of a flurry of activity, not only here in Washington, D.C., but across state capitals, the state legislatures, and just general like campaigns are starting to kind of like dust off the cobwebs and start thinking about essentially like, all right, well, how are we going to engage with key audiences and core audiences for the remainder of the year? What's our plan, right? So I'm delighted to be joined by Alex Dickinson with Beekeeper Group, and thankfully she'll be helping kind of talk through like the strategy portion of things. I'm in this like little tiny lane with the tools section. So I'm delighted to be talking with Alex today. And Alex, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you, Johnny. And thank you to Prompt.io for inviting Beekeeper to be a part of this. Wholeheartedly agree, spring is in full swing, and we've been getting a lot of bee phone calls here at Beekeeper Group. But I can assure you, for those of you unfamiliar with us, we don't work with real bees, although you should hear some of those messages that we do get. We believe that the old grassroots model that many advocacy organizations have thrived with is a little bit outdated. And a more appropriate metaphor is beekeeping. If you think about it, your bees or supporters are already buzzing. They're moving around, they're cultivating good honey, and they are cross-pollinating things. And you need a beekeeper to help you organize that and really make the most out of everything that you can get in an advocacy organization. When most people think about communications plans, they get caught up in the aligning of the audiences to the messages and the tactics. And that is, of course, really critical. You have to have a solid goal. You have to know your strategy and your approach. But can you give me a thumbs up or a emoji if you've ever felt like a communications plan you've built just didn't quite capture it all for you? Not. Oh, perfect. Yeah, great. Seeing a couple Yeah, I think with that somewhat happy poll response there, I was expecting to see some of that for sure. So the real critical element here is understanding why communications plans might not get you to where you want to go. And as Johnny was saying, he's in one lane, but it's a really critical lane. And I want to look at a suite of tools here. There are 3 reasons most communications plans don't succeed. They've missed some sort of basic planning step. Either they haven't really aligned to their audience, they don't know what tools they have available, maybe they've overshot their budget. The second reason is they haven't thought about how each of their tools and tactics should feed off of one another. And this is where it gets really critical to have that sort of beekeeping mindset, to think about how you're connecting all the elements together. The third thing is that they haven't created opportunities for their bees or their supporters to go out and do that pollination or advocate for impact. They haven't created those experiences and those moments that can really enhance your engagement, that will really create those effective communications outcomes. And so the solution that I think is critical to focus on here is not just include XYZ elements in your comms plan, but really moving beyond the basics and thinking about how you can get those tools deeply integrated and aligned with your audiences. So let's actually go over to the tools slide here. And take a minute to talk about tools, particularly the ways to really elevate your comms planning and make sure that it is this overall effective approach. Although there are many different kinds of tools, we are often told that there are 2 big categories that are worth considering: unpaid and paid tactics, right? I think it's a little bit of a misnomer. And actually, if we jump over here to the next slide, the tools that we use for effective communications plans are free in the same way that a puppy is free, meaning absolutely not free at all. I am hoping that there are some dog owners in here. With a puppy, of course, beyond an adoption fee cost, you've got to spend time training it. You've got to spend time feeding it, housing it, throwing it little birthday parties with puppy appropriate blue cupcakes. There's a lot that you have to do in that experience. Similarly, tools like email and social and the advocacy tools that we are bringing together require a deep investment, and it's not just financial. It's critical that we understand that investment at the outset of your planning process. So when we think about building effective plans, we have to ask ourselves, what does investing in digital advocacy tools really look like? So looking at this next slide here, when we started to build digital campaigns, we had the obvious focus on the action that we were trying to get people to take. But beyond that action, we needed to understand there's an investment in who is writing it, who is actually approving what's getting written, where is it getting posted, what are the different platforms, how are we connecting these things together, who is posting that content, and of course, crucially, who is reporting on it. That has been the case for a long time, and in any communications plan, you have to make sure that you have outlined those roles and responsibilities, that you've identified the platforms that it's going on. But some things have changed for a couple different reasons. The first thing is today, it is more important than ever to deeply align with your audience, and having a tool and a process through which you can connect your approach to the people that you're trying to reach. Some of that is going to be data, but some of that is just some basic comms effective planning. The other thing we have to remember is that it's a very generational experience online right now. Different generations are on different tools. Different experiences need to be created to activate different kinds of people online. We also see more than ever that you have to be trend aware. It's no longer just sufficient on many of these platforms to sit back and broadcast your content out. You have to understand what the current conversation looks like and feels like, and how people are engaging overall. The way that you can incorporate trend awareness is by making sure that you've gotten a rapid approval process in place. So making sure that as you are thinking about your plan, as you're going to come up with all these creative and cool ideas, how are you going to be able to get that rubber stamp to say, okay, yes, I can put this out now, and yes, I will know with confidence that it's aligned. Of course, the other thing that is always an X factor here is paid engagement. So investing in digital is obviously going to have a little bit of that paid element, but my point is all of it is an investment. There's also a little bit that has changed about social media today. And back when social media came on the scene, we were understanding it as yet another broadcast tool, a way for us to get information out to the masses. It started to evolve around the time of Facebook and Twitter into more of a social experience. So you had this opportunity to build connections with people. You had the amazing, incredible journey of finding someone across the planet who you might be able to have a conversation with. And that's truly the power of the internet. But today, we're seeing this transformation into the ability to make more curated experiences and connections online. So now social tools perform a few new functions that they didn't function as before. The first one is they create micro communities. And these micro communities are places where you're able to build and develop deep relationships and affinities with other people who have some sort of similarity to you or affinity to you. We're seeing these micro communities crop up on tools like Facebook or Instagram, but there are also platforms that are catering to that. Think Discord or other tools that have deeper communications platforms amongst that as well. It's really popular in patient advocacy groups, a really popular tool in anything where you're going to have some sort of deep alignment on your personal experience. And it's important that as we're doing effective planning now, you consider how can you tap into those micro communities? How can you break into that? The second trend that we're seeing is storytelling platforms. So good communications plans obviously have to have a strong message and a strong narrative that is moving you through. And as you're thinking about creating content and creating and delivering effective content, you have to think about what are the stories you want to tell and who are the storytellers that you're pulling through there. Platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels, these are fundamentally just places where people are absorbing content and story after story after story. So as you're doing your planning, think through what are those stories and how can you pull them. The third is, of course, connection creators, which is somewhat similar to our previous experiences in social and the past decade and a half, but it's a little bit more enhanced. Think about the ways that people are forging deeper connections on those. Like LinkedIn, they're creating and sharing more in-depth stories and in-depth conversations. Tools that actually cater to subcultures like Tumblr or even Lemonade. These are platforms where we're seeing deep conversations occur and deep connections happen that aren't necessarily your mainstream tools. And the last one are these thought leader platforms. And of course, that is going to be, of course, your Twitter, your LinkedIn, but also tools that have, again, this more curated experience like Mastodon or Post. And back pre-pandemic, there was still a sense that you should be on every single platform. You had to be on Facebook, you had to be on LinkedIn, you had to be on Twitter. That's no longer the case today. It is now important and imperative that you align your audience to the tools and the platforms that you're on. So when you're doing effective planning, making sure that you have that good sense of who you're trying to reach and what you want them to do is going to be critical. Of course, I would be remiss in talking about the current social landscape if I didn't touch on polarization. Right now, the social space, like our country, is extremely divided. And that means more than ever, you need to have tools that people have already opted into, tools that people have already accepted and said, yes, I want this in my universe. I want to get communications from you because anything that's more public facing is going to be subject to that deeper ridicule and that deeper polarization. That doesn't mean you should ignore that public side of it, but it means you have to do this deep investment on tools that have that opt-in ability there. So I'll touch on one of those, and then Johnny, of course, can touch on the other critical one there. But the first one is email really quickly. Email is a critical way for you to engage with your audiences today. When we are thinking about the social landscape, there is actually less disruption in email as compared to social platforms right now. Again, you might be getting a ton of different emails, but there are tools to curate your email, and people, I think, are becoming a little bit more savvy about what emails they know that they want to access. If you're able to create that good deep alignment there, they're going to want to get in there. They've already opted in, which is, of course, an important part of how you can communicate to them. And so you know that you have their permission to communicate with them. And you can also segment and make your content deeply relevant to them and get a lot of information in a fairly small package. You can link out to things, create that universal experience. And of course, most importantly, it gives you a ton of great data. So with that overview of tools that I'm touching a lot, I'm going to throw it to Johnny to talk about the other big tool here.
No, thanks for that, Alex. I love the before I dive into text messaging, I love the sort of the landscape and the little honeycombs of each of the different the different offshoots of social media. And I feel like just to touch on that for a second, I feel that every link that I see on Twitter now from some sort of creator or thought leadership is linking out to a Substack or some sort of I wouldn't call it a storytelling platform, but maybe just like a newsletter service, something that is owned and curated by a certain individual. I think I don't know what happened to Patreon, but I was a big fan of Patreon early on for a variety of, I won't tell anyone who I subscribed to or what I paid money to. A conversation for another time, but essentially seeing all those kind of groups, I'm willing to pay for that. I'm willing to hear from those folks through those mediums, right? I think that's really powerful to understand that landscape. Great, Catherine told me it's still around. Okay, I don't know where it is, but it's definitely around. But it's really interesting, right? And those things kind of go with ebb and flows of what works, what doesn't work, what gets acquired, what gets kind of integrated into a variety of different other aspects. But I think that's really crucial to understand that. But yeah, let's talk about text messaging. So I feel like there's some misconceptions around the tool itself, and it might be helpful to kind of frame just understanding text messaging is definitely here. I put this big number on there, 15 billion text messages that were sent in 2022. I think this only accounts for really the political and advocacy style, political mobilization style text messages that we saw in the midterms. So in all likelihood, that number is probably a lowball figure. If you start to consider all the brands and everyone else in this space, probably nonprofits not doing direct advocacy work, right? So it's certainly here, and there's a reason for that. And I think Alex touched on some of the reasons why folks are going and moving towards these curated communities and these specific style of experiences. Text messaging is becoming a very dependable and expected channel for audiences to engage. And it's nothing really complicated, right? Think about it this way, as if we're not talking it from a vendor or a firm perspective with Alex, we're expecting the organizations we care about to get to us through the channels that we prefer to engage with. We might not tell them that we want to be engaged that way. They have to figure it out themselves, right? That's sort of the push and pull there. But there's a reason why folks only engage over email or do a little bit of email and social and probably some text messaging. It's the same thing here, right? They are expected to engage with folks that they prefer to be engaged through. Additionally, I think classifying text messaging is interesting. I was just on a call earlier today where they solely view text messaging through the telephonic lens, where yeah, this is part of phones and stuff. But I talk to digital firms all the time and they view this, no, this is, you launch peer-to-peer texting through a platform like Prompt or others, it's digital, right? And I think folks are starting to kind of move away from this sort of analog view of texting into a space that's no, this is fully compatible and it can be fully integrated with digital campaigns, right? It sounds silly, but I think the progression of the products over this space have basically allowed you to track metrics and incorporate text messaging as a channel that you can track and see where folks are clicking through, going to landing pages, signing up, providing crucial details around cell phone information. And so all these things are essentially a viable channel for you. Also, when thinking of it from the content creating side of things, probably a long time ago, like you probably had to view like, all right, well, we have to view content creation through a single channel. We're developing this for YouTube. We're developing this for OTT, you know, whatever it might be, right? I think now most folks, I'd wager on Alex's team, have to think about it from a true multi-channel approach. How can we amplify this this content across a multitude of delivery methods? And text messaging wasn't a great tool for that early on. You probably got a really funky GIF or GIF, depending on who you are, or you got a really funky video that somehow was hazy and really wasn't optimized to T-Mobile or Verizon or whoever your carrier is. But now, because of being able to compress and optimize video, HD video, based on a variety of different factors, it's a great courier for this media to be delivered right into the inboxes of citizens across the country. And finally, there's a greater likelihood of people people opening, people reading, and people replying more quickly to text messages. I'm not going to put everyone on the spot here, but I'd imagine at any given point during the day, you're going to get a bunch of text messages. You're going to get a bunch of emails. You're probably going to get a bunch of DMs over LinkedIn or somewhere else. If you were to gather up the unopens, the unreads, the just straight up deleteds, the unsubscribes, those would pale in comparison to the unreads and everything on the unengaged over text messages. You're going to read those quickly, probably in the first 5 minutes or so. So if those are great metrics for you to consider, and ones that you'd bite someone's arm off to get compared to other channels. So that's why, like, this is something that is here to stay, and it's only going to be a stronger channel for folks to engage with moving forward. Next slide, please, Allie. Oh, thank you. And so, like, thinking about, you beat me to it. So there are a few different products in the text messaging space, and I'll kind of quickly go over these so it doesn't feel quite so seminarish. Thinking about short code, for instance, I think you all have probably seen this in effect through a presidential campaign or a national issue advocacy organization. You know, text join to 45256. Or energy to same 5 or 6 digit number. This case of short code is really, really great for folks that have a long-term vision for their communications plan. This isn't something I would recommend to folks that are really just trying to spin up something for the next 3 months or so. You could, but I think based on how you can use short code across all of the different mediums across your organization, and some of the cost and registration aspects of getting short code up and running, there's a little bit more rigorous process. This would be something I would advise for folks that say, hey, we have a 4-year vision for this. And one of our members of our team, Tommy, said, if you use short code, you basically want to put that in your email signature. You want to put that in every social campaign, every content should have that 4-digit number, or excuse me, that 5-digit number and keyword. And you should just use that for acquisition and broadcast messaging moving forward. It can be really advantageous that way. I'm going to kind of skip toll free for right now, based on like the folks that are in the queue and who are participating today, and focus on 10DLC. So this is the most commonly used text messaging product, essentially. And we'll get to the registration process for that and how that kind of works into compliance. But if you think about meaningful and impactful two-way conversations that are really integral to the viability of texting and peer-to-peer texting specifically, this is what you're going to be using day in and day out. So that is probably our most used and most leveraged product in the texting space, just to kind of give everyone sort of table setting of what's available or what you've kind of seen out there or experienced. You all probably experience this in some way, shape, or form. And so kind of when thinking about, considering all these different factors as we move on to the next slide here, and taking into consideration like how you should be investing in each of these tools, I think you're kind of getting the theme of this, that it's not really effective for you all to kind of lean on one particular channel or just one. I don't think anyone's really doing that. I think everyone's probably, I'm not going to talk percentages, but there's probably a high percentage of email for good reasons. dabbling in social, and probably some other mix of, some other mix of the communications landscape. I will say this, it's easier to, someone told me this when I was at Bloomberg, it's easier and more cost effective to make friends and make friends now than try to make friends later at the last minute. I really love kind of how we've kind of dialed in and kind of thought about, okay, how do we kind of figure out the investment side of things, and how do we actually go about allocating the right resources for each channel, right? And that's okay. These things are not going to be evenly split. I don't think Alex would even recommend that these things are a nice evenly cut cake across the board, right? So I think we're going to talk a little bit about building personas, talking about how do we experiment. I love the idea of experimenting now. I think it used to be such an obtuse or like such a foreign concept, or it seemed, I don't know, Alex, what do you think? I feel like back in the day, experimenting felt like I immediately go to like Frankenstein's laboratory and there's just like beakers bubbling with things, and that's just how my mind works. But it always felt really like I have to consider so much to think about experimenting. But now with all these metrics that a lot of these key platforms and key channels provide you, it's actually not that difficult to experiment on a limited basis, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's much less scary, I think, now that we have started to see the channels become less monolithic as well, with opportunities to do very targeted experiments to really parse out a little bit of your budget and not do, there's a lot more flexibility there.
100%. And so I think, I think if everyone could take one thing from this, is that we're sort of building towards like, let's think about long-term with our communication plan, but certainly let's not think about this as like, we just need to nail email. It's really about getting a multitude of things in order here, getting your house in order across all the different channels. So I think we're going to pivot. Oh yeah, great. Let's get into best practices. Let's get it.
Yeah. I was going to say that's an absolutely perfect segue to talk about engaging with intention. And Johnny, you were saying before, people have had this misconception about text. People have this misconception about all of these platforms in the past. And the biggest element that we have to remember when we are selecting and building communications plans today is this core focus on our audiences and the deep alignment to what we're actually trying to accomplish here. So when we are jumping into our tactics and our tools, we need to make sure that we're not jumping on to something else just because everybody else is doing it. What I mean by that is TikTok might not be right for you. And honestly, any of these tools,
real talk.
Yeah, real talk. Any of these tools might not be right for you. You have to really explore and examine what is the value that you're going to get out of the tool? What is the value to the audience that you're trying to connect with? And do you really have content that can be appropriately optimized for those platforms? And the second side of this is when you want to approach deep engagement, you need to do that with a solid data-based awareness. Actually, if we can go back to that other one for a second here. A solid database awareness of what you're trying to accomplish here. And that ties into this understanding of a narrative arc. So making sure that you're focusing in on your messaging, that you're focusing in on moving people through everything, and in that moving people through your narrative, that you are creating multiple touch points and experiences for your audiences. As I was saying before, one of the ways in which communications plans fail today is they don't give your audience something else to do. They don't give your audience some other way to connect with people. So similar to how we need to communicate and build content on a multi-channel approach, you need to think about everyone you're talking to as a similarly multi-channel outburst for you. You want to be providing them with content so they can go and continue to push that. And of course, as we were just talking about, earmarking some paid for experimentation and just some sort of concept for experimentation. And back on the multi-channel concept, we can go into the next slide here. The deep alignment has to happen with who you are representing yourself as. So when you go out into the world and you're creating content across these channels, what do you sound like? how do you get people on the same page? And the tool that we use internally at Beekeeper Group and that we work with our clients to create is a persona. And having a deep persona can help you really clarify what's the tone, what's the tool, and what's the outcome that we're looking for here. We'll look at this on a scale. So this is a specific example where we were trying to work with a client who wanted to have their tone feel more accessible versus exclusive. They wanted something that was right in the middle between traditional and modern. So how do you do that? This is helpful from a branding perspective as well as from a communications perspective, because it helped us decide, okay, maybe we need to think about something that feels a little bit more traditional and maybe feels like it's more direct. So text would have been a great example for this campaign. And then also creating the right kind of verbal tone as well, that authoritative to welcoming tone, always trying to figure out, are you trying to sound like you are directing people, or are you trying to sound like you're building a community? There's a couple other ways in which and dimensions that you can establish and explore when you are looking at that, which we can look at on the next slide here. So creating purpose through personas is, I think, an excellent opportunity for you to look at your comms plan and refine everything. Take a moment to make sure that every part of your comms plan aligns to a character. Every part of your comms plan has a set person in mind. That character should have a lot of details around them. Are they friendly? Are they a professional person? Are they someone who you would want to be connecting with? You want to understand the role of the audiences that you're trying to reach and the role of your own voice as an organization as well. Are you there to direct people to do something, or are you there to give something that is very informative? Are you there to inform them, or are you there to create community again? And again, trying to identify those ways to connect with people. Are you engaging with someone, or are they engaging with you? Are you creating and prompting these moments, or are you trying to receive and collect those and get into the conversation that's already happening? Are they willing to amplify for you? Are you willing to amplify their voice as well? And then, of course, the last element is just that tone. Are you someone who is creating this insider experience, or are you someone who's really just the facts man and trying to give people just the most basic information? This mindset, this refining approach can help you really make sure that you're connecting the dots in your plan.
Alex, can I ask you a question? This is really interesting. I feel like this in itself feels, I bet, for someone who's never thought about like the whole persona building, this might seem overwhelming, but I feel like, do most, like when you work with when you work with an organization, do you find that they come to the table with like, here's some assumptions we have about like the audiences that we need to, you know, drive meaningful engagement, right? Like they'll kind of, like maybe they have, I don't know, it's a, you know, membership-based organization, right? And they know exactly who these folks are, right? They talk to them every day. They've got loads of data on them. I'm sure you've probably have seen them have these massive assumptions, and then you all go through like this exercise of experimenting and delivering, you know, creative to them and seeing actually what the results are. I'm sure there's some like really interesting things that come out of that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've seen it always. I've seen some clients who have come to us just, hey, we have no idea. And I'll direct them to either trying to do some sort of data analysis, some surveys, or like building that basis and understanding of who their audience actually is and helping them figure out who they are. Or yeah, it's trying to make sure and confirm, yes, the people who you're trying to reach here are can engage in the way that you think that they can engage. The biggest challenge that we end up facing and that the personas helps us with, someone might have a sense of a persona, but they might not have connected that persona to the tactics. So they haven't done the thinking around how that person is communicating online and what platforms they're using. So they'll know who it is, but they haven't really thought through what's the way that I can reach that person.
Great call.
And of course, the most important thing is making sure that you're reaching them in a safe way.
Oh, 100%. This is, you know, in the pre-meeting for this, I tried to come up with some like elaborate metaphor around like why compliance equals confidence and why that's cool. I tried to describe like essentially like who you're going to trust, someone dressed up as a pilot or someone who is actually a pilot, right? Like when it comes to like getting your ducks in a row and getting registered and going through the proper registration and getting all these things checked off, you really don't want to cut any corners, especially from, I love how kind of Alex put all these in as a must-have and why it matters, but essentially, there's a difference between someone dressed up and someone that's gone through the accreditation and log the flight hours, right? If I carry on through this metaphor. So all these things are really important, and I'll get to text messaging in a second, but Alex, I feel like these things you might get some pushback from some of your clients on like, oh, do we really have to do all these like little things and have our name out there and get all these things? If someone were to look us up and everyone knows what we're doing, it's really not about that, right? It's really about like creating an experience and knowing exactly like we're getting messages from a legit organization. It's very similar to how like nonprofits probably view not only like, the IRS, for instance, but also like knowing that they work with accredited organizations like GuideStar or elsewhere to actually get these like accreditations or positive visibility on their organization. So I think all these things make sense, that you can't really skip these things.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think that having those validators, these are critical, but they also validate your persona and who you are, and making sure that the comms that you have behind the tools and that will help you avoid any disconnect or feeling of dissonance that people might have too.
Oh yeah, 100%. And there's some things, and I'm not going to read off everything for you all. You all can see the slides, but you just think of it take a second and think of yourself as like this audience that's being targeted, for instance. Like if you get an unsolicited email or you get an unsolicited text, strong likelihood you're never going to respond to that or dismiss it, can it. You'll never see them or like block them, so they're just going right to the right through the spam filters. So I think sure, you can cut corners and it might feel like it's going a lot faster than the normal process, but if you take your time and really think about providing this optimum experience for your audiences, that's going to pay off dividends long term. That's put a bow on that for sure. And when kind of thinking about like the texting side of things, and we can move on to the next slide, Ali, thank you. So when we're thinking about just compliance and registration on our end, so I'm not sure how many people are familiar. I know we have some prompt folks on the line here too, around the 10DLC process, but just think of it this way. This refers to the regulations and technology designed to sanction and vet messages via 10-digit long code within or to folks in the United States. So this is something that is just part of, I think, the evolution of where texting has come from, that it used to be viewed, and again, misconception now, but very wild west. Like a lot of people are doing it. We don't know who, there's not really someone, minding the gate or minding the ticket booth to see who's actually going through the turnstiles. Now there's a lot of like rigorous registration in place. And so there's a quick 3-step process to how we think about this and how we handle this for folks as a campaign service provider. But essentially, everything you can think of from a vetting process is in here. They ask everything from what your business type is, who you are, key contacts, but also use cases. And it makes you really think about, okay, well, what are we putting out into the space here? How are we using text messaging? What kind of messages are going out there? So this helps validate and kind of validate and helps folks kind of make their case to carriers and make the case that like, yeah, we want to be able to advocate. We're a trusted brand. We're a trusted association. We've been around for 100 years. We've been around for 20 years, whatever it might be. It lets people know that they are actually, if they were to say like, hey, where is this text message coming from? They know it's coming from a vetted organization. And usually setup time for these things is under 10 days. So going back to how we think about your larger communication plan throughout the year, this is why we're talking about putting together the kind of the framework now, because I can't tell you how many times, at least over the past, since spring has sprung, I've gotten a lot of questions around, hey, we need to start text messaging tomorrow. Can we do it? And I have to tell them, no, you can't. I wish I could help. But it's something that you really have to get your ducks in a row early on. And there's a reason for that, right? You know, my advice, and it's probably the same with you, Alex, is when thinking about compliance and building confidence with these audiences, is that if there's anything for you all to do from the registration or just like getting everything, any possible variable under control, you need to do that from the onset. Even if you know you're not going to be doing social media, or you know you're not going to be doing any paid media until like the third quarter or fourth quarter, right? It's okay. Get that done early, get it done. And so you can essentially leverage that at the appropriate time, right?
Yeah, I think to put a pin in that, it's the critical element here is doing the planning so that you get ahead of this. I think, as we were saying before, understand the new social landscape, understand the value of tools, but understand that you might not know when the tool opportunity is going to happen.
100%.
So get ahead of that as much as you can.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, it sounds, putting on like I am the consumer hat here. It's really about, yes, you are advocating for your organization, or yes, for your brand that needs to get your message out to the masses. But this is, you know, part and parcel, it goes to like protecting consumers too, right? They don't want to get unwanted messages. So yeah, you got to take a little bit of both there.
Amazing. I feel like as a comms person, I am constantly learning more every day. I am so grateful for the two of you. We have quite a few questions, so we want to get to that before we end. Dustin would love to know about recommendations for building up text lists. And I know that this can be pulled from many different areas, you know, email, etc. So Alex and Johnny, in terms of building up these lists, let's chat about that.
Sure. I'll just do a quick, I would love Alex's perspective on this first and foremost. I'll say the one thing that I've seen now is a lot of folks were very hesitant to ask for a lot of personal information or personal data. Like I would say a couple of years ago, like everyone was very like not tiptoeing around what they should be asking for, but they were very concerned about, you know, for acquisition, Dustin, like folks were like, okay, we just need to drive people to a landing page. We can only ask them this much information, because if we ask them too much, they'll drop off and they'll never talk to us again. So there's a lot of fear of asking for too much, right? So folks were probably asking for, I think overall, probably asking for, you know, first name, last name, zip code, and email address, right? There's a lot you can work off of that. Now folks are probably going not mobile first, but that's like almost like a prerequisite to putting together a landing page to drive signups. I think as far as like recommendations for building up the actual lists, obviously make sure that you've got any of your landing forms or ways for folks to sign up. You have to have mobile in there. I'll say this, we work with a lot of data vendors. It's a lot tougher to append those mobile numbers than you think. It's still not an exact science. So if you can do the hard work in the beginning, do that. It'll pay off dividends for you later on. I think, you know, I think this probably goes part and parcel with like what you're actually, if you're asking for that cell phone, you got to give something back. Like, what are they getting in exchange for that information? Is it just like, hey, we need you to be on our campaign? Great. Well, is it like access to, I don't know, could be to proprietary member-based information, right? If you sign up, great. Guess what? You get this treasure trove of member-based intel that we only provide our members. I think I was going to riff off of that a little bit, but what do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, make the ask. A lot of people just get scared of making the ask. So ask for people's information. I think, Johnny, what you were describing, those light gatekeeping experiences, if there's a data point. But really, to me, it's thinking about the integrated experiences where you can make the ask in multiple places at multiple different times. So when you
absolutely.
are thinking about how do you want, it's not, there's no one pathway to get text to build up your text lists now and to get those mobile numbers. You have to be integrating it into every part of your communications planning process and all the different multi-channel ways that you're communicating with people too.
Absolutely. This next one I think is right up your alley, Alex. Someone would like to know sort of an example of how you can use a persona in a campaign.
Absolutely. The best thing for me in using a persona in a campaign is being able to make sure that I am on the same page as everybody else who will be creating content and communicating that content. The persona helps you, one, as I was mentioning before, crystallize how you can communicate with those people and how you can find the pathways to get the information in front of them. But it also makes sure that obviously I'm working with multiple different clients on any given day, but that I'm lockstep aligned with who they are trying to reach here and what their voice is. It cuts down on the approvals. It cuts down on the ability to really target and refine. A great example, we worked with the National PTA a couple of years back to create a campaign around the Every Student Succeeds Act. This From Report to Results ended up being our campaign name, and we needed to come up with a persona and identity of someone who we were trying to communicate with and communicate to. So we had a person who was a PTA mom named Kathy, who we built an entire identity around, and we thought about all ways in which we could talk to her, even had a photo of her, even had a whole profile for her written up there. It helped us with every part of our communications planning process, having this character in our mind that was very specific and very focused in on how we would reach them.
I would love to see the war room for the PTA.
For Kathy.
For Kathy,
yeah.
I would love to see the strings.
Very
of you
organized, lots of Post-it notes.
Putting that together. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Amazing. I think that leads into another question that we just received about how do we measure that social media success?
So much of it is based on knowing what you're actually trying to accomplish. It's no longer sufficient to just look at impressions and engagement numbers. It's all about deepening that funnel. And to me, the real measure of success is actually not on the platform, but rather on the website and on the hub, and being able to see, am I directing people? Is a large enough portion of the traffic to my website coming from these social platforms? That's my biggest measure right now. So tying it into next steps. And this is all about, again, in your communications planning, having a good ladder of engagement. So knowing the different activities that you want people to take and making sure that you have a plan for ways to get people to make those activities. Social should be just one entry point for that. So I think social is a little further upstream than text in sometimes, but then if you can get them into text, then trying to engage and continue that conversation, and all of those, again, pointing all to things where you can measure the ultimate impact of what you're trying to do on tools that you have a little more control over.
Speaking of text, we do have a question about, would you ever recommend, Johnny, mixing or having multiple texting types? So short code for something, 10 DLC for others, for instance, and how that might play into your comms plan.
Yeah, I think, I mentioned earlier that it's, short code's not for everybody or for every campaign. I really do think you have to look at, like, what are your overall objectives? It's not something to just have some sort of vanity, like, hey, let's buy it because it's out there. I think you have to use it very purposely. So I think mixing those together is absolutely vital, because look at it this way. I think there are some messages and some content that are best delivered over kind of mass one-to-many broadcasts, right? Like, here's an alert. We need you to check this out, or here's we just launched our white paper, or here's some event that occurred. Check out more information. I think there's something where you don't need that two-way correspondence. That's totally legit. I think you should absolutely flex that muscle. I think when it gets down into wanting to, I think of some of the texts that I've activated on personally, they've never been off of alert, you need to take action now. It's always been, hey, this is coming up, Johnny, for a critical voter. Could we ask for your, could we ask for your support? Yes. Okay, great. Or yes, what can I do? All right, well, you can volunteer or you can contact your lawmaker. Those, I mean, it's all about kind of matching, to Alex's point, kind of matching the medium / product to the content you're trying to, or the action you want them to do, or deepening the funnel, so to speak. So if it's just, in many ways, just using that broadcast mechanism to just see if people read, see if people actually engage with it, is very valuable. So yeah, I think that's totally legit to start incorporating those both together if that's something you want to invest in.
Amazing. Well, we're winding down, so I'm going to ask one more question because I think this is kind of just a fun closing one. Someone would like to know if there is a comms plan that has directly influenced you, and if you took anything from it.
Ooh, okay. I can, Alex, I'll go quickly. It's sort of a hybrid of that, Allie. So I'll say this. So there's a group in Florida. This is basically like how I activated for this group, basically how they got me to mobilize on their behalf. This group that I believe it's called the Florida Restoration Rights Coalition. So they're helping folks like that are returning back to society gain the right to vote in Florida. And I saw it. I'm originally from Florida. I'm from Lake Wales, Florida, if anyone knows where that is, hour south of Orlando, middle of nowhere. Essentially, I think I saw like, I don't know, I saw it through like a political playbook article, read about it, say, oh, great, sure. Signed up for the email. I think I got a small like Giving Tuesday ask, and I think I gave $5 and didn't do anything else, right? But I kept getting like tons of emails like, hey, this is what we're up to. Hey, we could really use your support, or can you do this, or can you do X, Y, and Z? And I read, chunked it, canned it, didn't really do much from there. And eventually, I think I got some like social ads too, right? Pretty straightforward. So they were kind of creating this echo chamber for me to like think about everything, think about Florida, like connecting the Florida man back to Florida. And then eventually, out of the blue, I think it was a Friday afternoon, I got a text message to say, hey, Johnny, can you phone bank for us like on Saturday in the middle of the day? And without skipping a beat, looked at it, replied back saying, yeah, well, when do you need me? And it was just instantaneous, right? And so, and for everyone who hasn't phone banked, phone banking's tough. Like phone banking is intense. Like it's not like you can't really mail it in. So it's a huge ask, and I got activated off of that. And that led me to like getting involved there, doing text banking for them, and doing like Facebook fundraising, and raised a few thousand bucks for them. So like that never would have happened if one, they were not like constantly giving me opportunities to get involved, read more about progress they're making, and sort of connecting the value of like, if you can help us do X, we can actually get this over the line. So it sounds hokey, but it worked on me. Yeah, that's it. Alex, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, my bland answer is every communications plan affects me because I learned something from everyone. But my real answer is the Humane Rescue Alliance in DC.
Oh, yeah.
They did a ton of, they've done a ton of really fantastic and multi-purpose surround sound campaigns, and I got a cat out of it. So,
hey,
although
that's pretty effective.
Yeah, very effective. Yeah, it was the multiple touch points, and again, thinking about all the different places and ways in which someone who might be on the market for a pet was trying to explore those options. They created those touch points, and I was persuaded, perhaps.
Oh,
Good
very
pun.
nice.
Yeah, sorry.
Amazing.
Didn't do any bee puns for
No,
you.
you had to. Absolutely.
Well, I just want to say, on behalf of Prompt, thank you both so much for joining us. I am thrilled to say that I personally have learned something, which is the whole point of a webinar, right? And it's been a really just enjoyable experience. If you all have questions, feel free to reach out to Alex and Johnny on LinkedIn. And thank you so much to everyone for joining. We are going to stop the recording and stop the share, and